When the Torah or the Old Testament was first written in Hebrew, it was written without diacritics, or as they call it, naked. It wasn't until 2,000 years later when the diacritics were added to the Hebrew text. And in case you didn't know, diacritics, like tashkil in Arabic, can entirely change the meaning of words and sentences. That's why there are many instances in the Old Testament where there are several views on what was actually written, and in many cases, they can contradict one another if they were slightly changed. Like, for example, Psalm 23:4, where a very small change in the diacritics can give the exact opposite meaning. For this reason, and after 2,000 years, it was impossible to have the exact text as it was revealed. And in many cases, some parts were deliberately adjusted to take the text to a desired direction. Now, the people of the book, with this understanding and this experience, knowing that the Quran was first written without diacritics and without letter dots, they drew the same conclusion about the Quran as the Old Testament and claimed that the Quran was distorted or its meaning has been changed, like they did to their own book. But there are two major differences that make it impossible for the Quran to be distorted in any way, not even an extra dot. First, the one who first added the diacritics to the Quran is someone called Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali. Now, the question is, after how many centuries after the revelation of the Quran did he do that? Well, not centuries or even decades. In fact, Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali was born during the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, during his message, but he never met him. And after the passing of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali added the diacritics to the Quranic text at the request of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was one of Kuttab al-Wahy, or the writers of revelation. So this entire process happened among the Sahaba who witnessed the revelation of the Quran and memorized it. Furthermore, Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali recited the whole Quran to Uthman ibn Affan, who was also one of the writers of Wahy. Not only that, there is physical evidence of this in the form of manuscripts which date back to the 1st century of Hijrah, like this one, which shows the early system of tashkil devised by Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali, using red dots and shapes on black text. So here, the honored name has half a circle facing up, which is shadda with fatha, and dot next to the ha indicating dhamma. So here, Allahu. And here the dot on top of the ayn here means that there is fatha here. Ala. And the next word, the ayn here has a dot under the ayn to indicate kasra. And mim has double dots, which means that there is tanween kasra here. Allahu ala ilmin. And so on. And then after Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali came his student Nasr ibn Asim, who then added the dots on the letters that have dots like Jim, Ta, Tha, and so on. Since more and more non-Arabs became Muslims and they needed this to be able to recite the Quran correctly, which was then also witnessed by many of the Sahaba who were still alive. So the addition of the diacritics and the letter dots happened right after the passing of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and with the supervision of Kuttab al-Wahy and the Sahaba. Afterward, in the 2nd century, came Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad, who then turned the dotting system of diacritics into the familiar system that we have today, with fatha, dhamma, kasra, tanween, and so on. But then, you might be wondering now, could there have been any room for human error, adding an extra dot or point, because you're adding this to the entire book? Well, this then takes us to the second difference between the Quran and any other revelation. The Quran was not discovered in a cave in a form of scrolls and manuscripts, like the Old Testament, but it is an audiobook which was preserved in the chests of thousands of Sahaba, and was memorized word for word and were taught by the Prophet, peace be upon him, what each word and each letter sounded like. So adding the tashkil was according to what they heard and memorized from the Prophet, peace be upon him. So the text was just too familiar to all of them. To understand more what I mean, let's consider this example. If I ask 10 English speakers to write the correct vowels for this sentence, 10 out of 10 would be able to perfectly write the correct vowels in their places. Why? Because it is a very familiar sentence with very familiar words. Now, if you ask any Muslim today to write the dots and tashkil of this sentence, they will also be able to do it perfectly because it is very familiar to them. Now, the entire Quran to the Sahaba was not only familiar to the Sahaba like these examples, but they actually memorized every single word and every single sound, like millions of people today. So it is impossible that any changes, not even one single dot, or any alteration could have taken place. But then, what about cases like these? Ayat that contain words that can be read differently by changing the dot placement or the diacritics. Did this come from mistakes of dotting or something? Well, let's take this example. These two here are two qira'at of the Quran. Both are Quran, and they were both revealed exactly like this. One time it is revealed as yushrik, and another time it is revealed as tushrik. And in many cases, like in this one, they don't give exactly the same meaning, but they consolidate and enrich one another, and they never give contradicting meanings. And the same applies to all such cases. They are just simply different qira'at, and they are all 100% Quran with the highest possible degree of authenticity. Each qari reads according to who he'll learn it from, which all eventually lead to the same source, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. If you want to dive deeper into this topic of 10 qira'at, then I highly recommend watching this lesson, which covers the most important aspects you need to know with many different examples. Finally, the beautiful thing about the Quran is that every time someone tries to attack it or discredit it, it somehow shows its magnificence and proves its perfect preservation even more. Thanks for watching. If you want to start learning the tajweed, then start with this playlist. And also, don't forget to check my latest book about tajweed and download the companion app. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.